Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this community meeting about the Wightman Park Stormwater Project. We appreciate you joining us. I'm Elaine Henricks, the Education and Outreach Associate at the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority. I help with communications for stormwater projects, and I'm going to be facilitating this meeting tonight. As I already mentioned, we're recording this meeting. I'll also be taking notes during the discussion times. We're going to post the recording, presentation slides, and notes to the project webpage after the meeting, so you can review it or share it with your neighbors. We'll also be muting everyone except me during the presentation so that you can hear me clearly. If you have a question during the presentation, you can put it in the chat by opening the chat box at the bottom of your screen. You can also ask questions at the end of the presentation. We're going to go through the questions in the chat and also let people come off mute so we can have some verbal Q&A. We're going to start with introductions of the project team. I'll introduce folks. I've already done a bit of welcome to you all. We'll then go into an overview of stormwater problems in Pittsburgh, brief overview, an overview of the Wightman Park Phase 2 project. We'll then go into an overview of the progress that was made on the construction of the project in 2021, and then give it some information on what you can expect for construction in 2022. And then we'll wrap up with question and answer. So the project owner for this phase of the project is the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority. The project manager is John Wada. The assistant project manager is Ben Gruner. Ben can't be here tonight, but John is on the call. The project designer is Ethos Collaborative. The project manager, Barton Kirk, is on the call tonight. The assistant project manager is Elizabeth Glukowski. The construction firm is Zatola Construction. The construction manager is TJ Johnson, and the assistant construction manager is Ryan Huber. And then the construction management firm is Answer Advisory. The project manager is Brian Martucci. The other project manager is Nicholas Armstrong, both of who are on the call. And then the construction inspector that is on site is Stephen Sykes. So to go into the stormwater problems, as many of you know, Pittsburgh, our region, has many stormwater problems. These started throughout time, but were somewhat exacerbated by how our system has been built since we first began installing sewers in the mid-1800s. Many of these original sewers are still in use today, and these bones of our sewer system were designed for a different time, when there were less people living in the city, when there was more green space and fewer impervious surfaces, which are hard surfaces like roads and driveways and parking lots, sidewalks, as well as roofs that do not soak up stormwater. So when our city was built differently, there was a lot more opportunities for the rain that fell to soak into the ground rather than run off. Now that we have more development, more pavement, we also are experiencing more rain and more localized storms. And that means that more of our stormwater that falls is running off, and it is more than the system was built to handle. So this stormwater often combines with sewage from toilets and sinks in our sewers. If the sewer system gets overwhelmed through storms, instead of sending the sewage to this treatment plant to be cleaned and released back into the rivers, the system dumps it directly into rivers and streams, or it can also bump back up into people's basements. It doesn't take much to overload the system. It can happen with just an inch of a rainfall or less. And that means that billions of gallons of overflow reach our streams and rivers each year. In response to these growing stormwater issues, the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority is stepping up. Historically, we've been responsible for the conveyance of sewage. In terms of stormwater, that means that PWSA is responsible for stormwater once it entered the sewer system through a storm drain or a roof downspout, while the city of Pittsburgh was responsible for stormwater above ground. In 2019, the PWSA became a stormwater authority in addition to being a water and sewer authority. We're collaborating with the city of Pittsburgh on who's responsible for what when it comes to stormwater. So in addition to working to reduce overflows of combined sewage and basement sewer backups, we're also starting to work on flood mitigation. Our goal is to build a system that keeps as much stormwater as possible out of our burdened sewers during rainstorms and mitigate flooding. The Wightman Park Stormwater Project is one of many projects we're designing and building across Pittsburgh to help reduce pollution and flooding. The second phase of the project focuses on capturing and bringing stormwater to the new stormwater storage infrastructure that was built within the park during the first phase. The Wightman Park project was brought about through a public process where community members helped to develop a master plan and final design for a safer, cleaner, greener, and more accessible Wightman Park with better stormwater management. PWSA partnered with the city of Pittsburgh on the Phase 1 stormwater project to regrade the park for better stormwater drainage, construct a large rain garden, and install underground stormwater storage below the new baseball field and playground. In this map, you can see that in the park, the orange areas are the underground storage and the yellow is the rain garden. Construction started in spring of 2019 for the park, and the park itself was reopened as a renewed community asset in the fall of 2020. The rain garden and underground storage in the park were designed to hold stormwater captured from nearly 30 acres of the neighborhood, which is where the ongoing Phase 2 project comes in. Retrofits on portions of Wightman Street, Woodmont Street, Negley Avenue, Solway Street, and Murray Avenue will capture and direct rainfall to the park, where it can be stored, then slowly released into the existing sewer system after the storm. This map shows the project capture area outlined in royal blue. This is the drainage area managed by the street stormwater infrastructure. The light blue areas are the project work areas where the new stormwater management infrastructure has already been constructed or will be constructed. The Solway Street and Murray Avenue intersection towards the right of the map is the remaining intersection where stormwater retrofits will be constructed this year. Work in the other project areas this year will include plantings and maintenance. The stormwater retrofits include the addition of what we're calling curbed stormwater bump out planters at intersections, channel drains that convey stormwater under the street between planters, and upgraded sewer inlets. The stormwater bump outs are designed to help protect pedestrians at crossings by decreasing the width of the crossing, which helps reduce the amount of time it takes to cross the street. And then also have natural amenities with plants. The stormwater conveyance are the narrowed parts of the planters, I guess you could say. So from the intersection, the planter can be somewhat wide, and that's the purpose, to be a bump out, as it goes closer to the park, in this case from Negley towards the park itself. The conveyance narrows to get back some of the street and still convey stormwater. This also includes these like intersection retrofits are including ADA ramps and the mid-block crossing, which is on Solway Street from the park to the carriage house, is also raised to help reduce likelihood of pedestrian incidents. So now I'll go through the design for each portion of the Phase 2 project. At the intersection of Wightman and Solway, the stormwater planter on the north side of the project, or the north side of the intersection, was constructed during the Phase 1 park improvements. The new concrete planter box was constructed on the south side, and that's kind of mirroring the north side. The new inlets were also installed to help capture stormwater, and stormwater from that new planter box on the south side is conveyed through a pipe under the street into the park. The raised mid-block crossing of Solway Street, which I said is between the carriage house and Wightman Park, is to provide a safer crossing. Stormwater in those concrete planter boxes on the south side of the street are conveyed to the park under the street itself. At Negley and Solway, planter boxes at the intersection corners are connected to the long linear planters that lead to the park. The planter boxes are designed to capture smaller, more frequent storms throughout the project area. That means that like when these planters reach their capacity during larger storms, they're designed to overflow into the new inlets that then connect to the existing sewer system. This is kind of like a backup in case of larger storms. The Negley and Woodmont intersection has a similar design to the Negley and Solway intersection. This drawing shows the linear trench drains crossing Woodmont Street in this case. Stormwater running down Woodmont will enter planter and then be carried either under the sidewalk corner in a pipe or under the street in a trench drain to the next planter, and then continue down towards Negley and Solway in this case. The Solway and Murray intersection is the remaining intersection for construction work this year, as I've mentioned. The design is similar to Woodmont and Negley, but we changed two of the bump out planter designs to accommodate bus stops along Murray Avenue. We're planning platforms as part of these bump outs instead of depressions in that case, so that folks can stand on and board the bus. I'll now move into giving you an overview of the progress we made on construction in 2020 and 2021 last year. Construction began in April of 2021 due to cold weather and restrictions on paving. We entered a winter construction pause in December of 2021. During 2021, we constructed 4 of the 5 subphases of the project. So we broke the overall phase 2 project into 5 subphases based on location for ease of construction coordination. And in 2021, we completed the construction parts of the subphase 1, which is what we talked about close to Wightman Park with Wightman and Solway intersection. Subphase 2, which is the mid-block Solway Street crossing. Subphase 3, which is the South Negley Avenue and Solway Street intersection. And then subphase 4, which is the Woodmont Street and Negley Avenue intersection. In this entire project area of the phases, like subphases 1 through 4, we also completed some initial plantings in some of the planter boxes. To help illustrate the construction process, in case you didn't see it if you live in the neighborhood, here are some example photos from the Negley and Woodmont intersection. After excavating the future planter box areas, crews built temporary wooden frames to serve as molds when the concrete was poured. The wooden frames were then removed and pipes or trench drains were connected to the set concrete planter box. You can see kind of the hole in the middle intersection for the pipe that would go under the corner of the sidewalk. And then once the planter box connections were complete, the surrounding sidewalks were restored and soil was placed into the planter box. So construction is going to be starting again soon, which is why we're having this meeting to help folks learn about the project and ask questions. And we're coming out of the winter construction pause. We expect to mobilize for construction in late March or early April of 2022. And then we expect to end construction this summer. The schedule may shift due to weather, unforeseen site conditions, or other factors. Work this year, though, will focus on the construction of subphase 5 at the Solway and Murray intersection. And work will also include final plantings and maintenance in the other subphase areas that have already been constructed. So as I said, where construction will start, we are going to be starting there and then probably doing the plantings later throughout the project area. So crews are going to work at that intersection, focusing one corner at a time if possible to well, they're going to install catch basins throughout the whole intersection, and then one corner at a time, kind of the underground piping, trench drains, and the planter boxes and new concrete sidewalks and curbs. All this work will be done in the public right of way, and as I mentioned before, the stormwater improvements will then be directing rainfall to Wightman Park. As part of this project, we've been doing utility coordination, which includes holding or relocating utility poles, and it's also some relocation of gas line valves, water line valves, and hydrants in the project area. And then, as I said, restoration, the final plantings and restoration are expected by summer of 2022. So for your daily impacts that you may expect to see, the typical work schedule is going to be 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, but this Monday through Thursday, sorry. Fridays and Saturdays are possible though. So traffic signs and detours will be posted, and flaggers and or police will be on site during active construction work at the intersection of Murray and Solway. Parking signs for no parking will be posted 48 hours in advance in the areas where active construction work is taking place. And then for the results of this project, minimal parking loss is expected when the project is complete. For construction communication, which I normally handle, we are going to be providing construction updates every other week via email to our distribution list, as well as posted on our project webpage. Our project webpage is at pgh2o.com/Wightman-Park-2. We also can provide you with that email or that link in the chat. You can go to the project webpage or email me directly to sign up for our email distribution list. We also have a construction sign about the project up in Wightman Park, actually, at kind of the entrance near that mid-block crossing. And it includes some project information and contact information. If you have questions about the overall project or construction, you can feel free to reach out to me by phone or email. You can also contact John Wada or Nick Armstrong from the construction project team with construction related questions, or you can speak to folks on site if it's urgent. So thank you all for listening to this presentation. I hope I didn't go too quickly, and we'll move on to answering some questions from the chat and then letting folks come off mute to ask questions. And I'm going to stop sharing to do that because right now I can't see you all. So let me open up the chat real quick. Sorry for the delay, folks. All right. And project team, feel free to correct me if I've gone too far up in the chat and a question has already been answered in the chat itself. First question is, will the intersection bump outs be filled with soil and planted or left as a deep pool as they are currently?
No, they were, I believe we're close to grade with our soil there, close to the elevation. So the next step is just to put the plants in this spring.
Okay, thanks, John. And Rebecca had already done a bit of answering on that one. The next question is, the pipe outlet looks rather high. What protection is there against freezing?
This is Barton. Generally speaking, storm drainage pipes are not subject to freezing or the same sort of freezing concerns that you would have for a domestic water line that has volume of water in it continuously. So freezing is not an issue for those pipes at that elevation.
Thank you, Barton. And then a question, is the Boulder water course open for receiving the captured water already? I think that's the Boulder water course in the park itself.
This is Barton again. some of you may have observed some water coming into the park through the cascade, but at present, there is a just before that cascade, there is a under the sidewalk, there is a control structure that's presently limiting that water from coming into the park until after phase 2 is completed. Once phase 2 is completed, we'll adjust that control structure so that water can begin flowing into the park more regularly.
Great, thank you, Barton. I was curious about that too. And then we have a follow-up question about the soil for the planters. The follow-up question is, so more soil will be added to the bump outs that have some plants in them? As a, I guess, question of when planting will more soil be added?
This is Barton again. No, the planters that are constructed at this time, especially and including those that are planted with the trees and shrubs, are generally at the finished grade, and they will be additional plantings so that those planters are fully vegetated, and that the additional vegetation that's going to be planted this spring will be generally growing to between 2 and 4 feet in height, and will fill out those planters so that they are fully vegetated once fully established.
Thank you for the clarification, Barton. Another question is, will water be turned off during any of the construction?
I don't believe we have any, at the last intersection we're going to be at, I don't believe we're going to have any interruption in water.
Thank you, John. Okay. A question of how much warming will be provided if/when electricity, water, warning, I'm so sorry. I apparently can't read today. How much warning will be provided if/when electricity, water, or gas needs to be turned off during construction?
Nick, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the gas company relocated their gas line. The utility pole was moved at Murray. So there should be no interruption with any utilities.
Yeah, that's correct. In barring hitting anything, unexpectedly. So it wouldn't need to be turned off.
Thank you. Another question in the chat, we've got a lot. Debris has always been a part of stormwater runoff. When will this be collected in the images you've shown, and how will that be cleaned up as it builds up?
This is
PWSA, sorry, Barton.
Yeah, John.
Yeah, we have a maintenance contractor that will be maintaining these, cleaning them, any maintenance needed. They'll take care of all of our green infrastructure sites around the city.
Thank you, John. Next question. The curbs are very low. How do you plan to protect walkers from falling in, especially at night?
This is Barton again. So the design of the stormwater planters is something that is a little new to the city of Pittsburgh, but the similar planters have been constructed in other areas around Pittsburgh and are much more common in other cities across the nation who have been dealing with retrofitting urban cities with stormwater infrastructure, very much like these planters. And the conventional design for these planters is to have a 4-inch curb wall along the edge of along the sidewalk edge of the planters to prevent, to give an indication to pedestrians that there is a drop on the other side. Some communities handle it differently, but the way that most communities and the city of Pittsburgh have decided that the common standard is for what we call a 4-inch toe kick along the edge of the planter to give pedestrians a warning that there is a drop on the other side.
Thank you for that explanation, Barton. Another question, what about the clogging of drains or pipes, which is actually kind of separate from the debris question on the surface, perhaps. So do you have clarification, John? Will that be the same maintenance contractor for the green
Yes.
infrastructure or separate?
No, that would be the green infrastructure contractor, maintenance contractor. There's also things in place. If you see where there's sort of a wall with it almost looks like an asphalt curb in there, a square curb, you know, that's designed to catch debris. So, and plus the maintenance contractor.
All right, next question. Will there be any standing water underground? Are there any concerns about mosquitoes or odors?
There should be no, go ahead, Barton.
So these, each of the bump outs are designed to drain down rapidly after a storm. So the soils that are in the planters are a sand-based soil that is designed to absorb water rapidly after the event. So you may see water standing, you certainly will see water standing in the planters during storm events. But then after the storm, that water should drain away within 24 hours. The general rule of thumb is that mosquito breeding, as long as water is drained within 72 hours, that you prevent the breeding of mosquitoes. So we generally try to have these systems drain in a matter of a few hours, maximum a day. So there will be also odors would come from a condition where where water was sitting for longer than 72 hours. And so we're creating a condition where you have a soil that drains quickly, stays aerobic, so they would not generate odors. So the answer to that is no. We will not have standing water to create mosquito habitat. Thank you.
Thank you, Barton. And a question that is just to say it out loud, and then I'll answer of what plans there are for cleaning up litter that has found its way into the bump outs. That is also part of our maintenance contract, but I'll also let John answer for in the immediate term.
Yeah, that would be our maintenance contract. I see another one, you know, how often they'll be there. I'll have to look into that, how often they come out.
Great, I've noted that as well, that we will check on that and include it in the notes as a follow-up. We have another question about falling into planters, which was answered, what will prevent folks from falling into the planters, which was answered by Barton. And then another question, South Negley at Solway is now very narrow. Are there any plans to make it a one-way street?
I can speak to that. Perhaps others can as well. Generally, the conversion of streets from one to two-way is something that is handled by the city of Pittsburgh's Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. They were directly involved in this project from a review standpoint. We did discuss Negley Avenue with them and the narrowness of that street. They consider Negley Avenue, along with many streets in the city of Pittsburgh, to be a yield street. So they acknowledge that it does not have sufficient width for 2 travel lanes and 2 parking lanes. But the idea is that by permitting two-way traffic, it helps to keep traffic slow to allow for safer intersections for pedestrians. And so that the ultimate answer would be with Domi, but I haven't had any indication from them that they are planning for Negley to be one way anytime in the future or anytime soon.
Thank you, Barton. That is a very good explanation. We have a comment that someone likes that the bump outs narrow the road because it slows down traffic, which is good to hear. And then another question about the planters and safety. What is the accident rate for the planters in other cities? The 4-inch curb looks like it would just make us trip.
This is Barton. I do not know any reported accident rates or any reported increase in accidents pertaining to the 4-inch toe kick. It's not something that I've personally tracked. I don't know if there is data available on that or not.
Thank you, Barton. Okay, question related to the maintenance contract. Who is the maintenance contractor and who do we contact if a concern arises? 311.
Yeah, we could provide the maintenance, the actual contractor and their schedule. But I mean, if there's something, urgent, yes, contact 311 and that'll get right to us.
Thank you, John. Are they also able to contact our 24/7 dispatch?
They could also do that, yes.
Okay, yeah. Just reach out to us through 311. And then the question about how often, I'll note that down. The maintenance contract comes out, made that note to provide that follow-up in the notes for these questions about the maintenance contractor. We have a comment that might turn into a question. Okay, yeah, it is a question. There is typically no parking at intersections to allow cars to turn more easily. The bump outs narrow the lane significantly at the intersection. I understand this makes it shorter for pedestrians to cross, but makes navigating for cars much more difficult. Is it necessary that they be at the intersections? Is it necessary that they narrow the intersections so much?
This is Barton again. There are very few opportunities for managing stormwater in the street right of way on streets where parking is at a premium. And when we were engaged in the design for this project, particularly for this neighborhood, we did go through a number of scenarios looking at where the opportunities were, trying to minimize the impact on parking as much as possible, and so the street corners where the bump outs are at the intersection, generally the reason that this kind of design has gained popularity in other cities, and has been pursued here, is because that space at the corners is a no parking zone, and it also, as the person who brought up the question pointed out, it also helps to increase pedestrian safety at those intersections. Yes, it does make it more difficult for vehicles traveling through, and that's something that we discussed with the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. Their general position on it is that by slowing cars down through that intersection, the bump outs improve pedestrian safety, and that is their highest priority. So if it does make drivers they perhaps have to wait a little bit longer to proceed through, but generally from a safety perspective, that is considered a plus rather than a negative. And I realize that it can be more frustrating to drivers, while it is, on the other hand, safer for pedestrians. But I guess to answer the question though, in terms of yes, the bump outs could be narrower, but the standard that the city of Pittsburgh has adopted for those bump outs is that they are on average about 6 feet wide. In many cases, some of these bump outs are narrower than that because of the constraints of the site. But generally speaking, the bump outs are designed to be about the width, or just less than the width of a parking lane. And so that has become the adopted standard.
Thank you, Barton. That is good information to have. Another question, is the safety fence in front of the school going to be replaced with a permanent fence?
I can handle that question, Elaine. This is Rebecca with PWSA. Right now that we are still evaluating whether or not we would install the fencing. So at this point in time, the temporary fencing is going to remain in place.
Thank you, Rebecca. Question about the bump outs. Are other cities with bump outs like these subject to similar snowfall as Pittsburgh? I'm concerned that heavy snowfall will obscure the planter curves.
This is Barton. Yes. Similar types of green infrastructure have been installed in other northern cities with northern and midwestern cities with similar snowfall. And I understand the concern. One of the things that is aids in the sort of the visual cues of the planter are the plantings themselves, which have not been completed and established. So I think that the visibility of the stormwater planters will become more apparent with that vegetation in place. And I know that has been other similar planters that have been installed around the city of Pittsburgh. That is an important part of their function and remaining visible.
And also, Barton, at the intersections, we put those I don't know what you call them, the white markers there.
Yeah, the reflective delineators, correct.
Yeah.
Thank you, Barton and Nick. I think I've reached the end of the current chat questions. If I have missed one, just let me know. And in the meantime, it looks like Deborah Moss has a hand raised to ask a question, perhaps, if you want to come off mute.
Sorry, I was just in the middle of typing my question. Thank you for calling on me. I had two questions. One was in follow-up to some of the other concerns about the narrowing at intersections and the safety related to that. And I was particularly wondering about the intersection at the Solway Wightman area where you're turning right from Solway onto Wightman when there are oncoming cars, but you have to make a really, really, really wide right turn. So it sort of brings you into the oncoming lane. So I didn't know if there was any consideration about speed bumps or stop signs or anything that was at that intersection. That was one question. Oh, and then my second question has to do with the block of Solway between Murray and Shady. We just had like 10 trees that had to be removed. And I am imagining it's going to increase our water runoff significantly and didn't know if there was some consideration about that. Thank you.
This is Barton. Regarding the first question about the right-hand turn onto Wightman from Solway, that intersection, again, the turning radius for that intersection was reviewed and approved by the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. Regarding the speed of vehicles coming down or coming either direction on Wightman, if there is a concern about the speed of vehicles on that street, I would suggest that you reach out to the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. You could also talk to, reach out to them via 311. But that addressing the speed of vehicles on Wightman was not something that was within the purview of this particular project.
Barton, I can jump in. This is Emily Yonan with Councilperson Strasburger's office. And I can chime in a little bit here. And Deborah, I can follow up with you also on the side with more information. We have been talking with the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure about this intersection because we've received some comments before about concerns and possibility of adding a stop sign. I can take this back and continue the conversation with them. I know they'd said last year that a stop sign might not be feasible based on like the locations with other intersections and some other sort of national code related regulations. But with those concerns, I can follow up with them again to just continue the conversation for that intersection.
And then there was Deborah's other question about the trees. I
Oh,
wasn't
yes.
aware of that, but I think that's not in our limits of work, I don't think.
No, I think I can also respond to that question. Thank you, Nick, for pointing that out. So in terms of the planning and design, no, we were not aware of at the time of design that those trees were being removed. Trees do a tremendous amount, particularly large mature trees do a tremendous amount to intercept stormwater, particularly the smaller storm events, the more frequent smaller events. And so protecting those large mature trees are always important and something that was a consideration, a factor in this design. But for larger events, after the trees sort of intercept that water, it still carries through the canopy. So this system is the loss of those trees will not necessarily have a major impact on the effectiveness or performance of this stormwater system. But that being said, they still are, we want to continue to protect that tree canopy, that existing tree canopy wherever we can.
Deborah, can you just repeat where the trees were removed?
I had to go off mute. On the north side of Solway between Shady and Murray.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay, I've taken that note down. And Emily Unin has also shared the Council District 8 email if folks have further questions, as well as the city forester is also a point of contact, which has been pointed out in the chat. Judith, I don't know whose hand up is first, but Judith, if you want to come off mute, and then Jennifer.
Right, I thought I was off mute. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, you were. Sorry, I didn't even see that. You are,
Yeah, just two comments. First, about the trees. The foresters, the arborists from the forestry department had told us most of them would not be cut down. And then the people who actually did the work just came down the street and said they were told to cut them all down. But that's just one of the reasons why I'm concerned about this issue, because we've already seen how messed up things can get otherwise. But I just wanted to add a comment to what Deborah Moss said regarding the intersection going from Solway, turning right onto Wightman. It's not that it's not merely that it's a hard turn to make. It's that you must go in the oncoming traffic lane. So people would have to stop a couple of parking spaces before that turn, and then you can't see the people who are there. I think it's gonna be a problem. The cars coming down Wightman, at least you can see they're coming down, but the cars coming up from Wilkins, you won't be able to see them, nor they to see you, until you're in their oncoming lane because of the way the turn is. So there are bigger problems there than maybe were perceived initially. Maybe on paper it looks different from what it is in reality.
This is Barton. I do understand the concern there. Again, like Negley, Wightman is a yield street. There isn't sufficient width for 2 full lanes of traffic, and so while the bump out has not necessarily improved the condition for drivers turning onto Wightman Street. It is a condition that persisted prior to the construction of the bump out, and I am familiar. I've made that turn a lot myself, and I understand the concern there. I'm not, again, it's the design has been was laid out according to the criteria for these kinds of intersections, and hopefully there's an opportunity to discuss opportunities for making Wightman itself, I'm sorry, Wightman Street itself easier to navigate. But the radius, the same sort of condition that we have on Nagley is the same condition that we have on Wightman. But I do agree, cars do tend to travel faster on the Wightman section.
Thank you. Jennifer, do you want to come off mute?
Yeah, actually, this is Kevin. Jennifer's here with me, but this is Jennifer's husband. So one's question, one's a bit of a comment as well. So there's also going to be bump outs put at Murray and Solway. Are they going to be similarly wide and affect that traffic at that intersection? And just the kind of like the follow up that we were just talking about with these streets being yield streets. I understand that's that to drive along those streets, you have to be aware of the traffic in the other direction. But I think to me what the issue isn't that they're necessarily wide, but that they're at the actual intersection, which makes navigating the actual turn much more difficult. Normally that's where our question before is normally there's no parking within say 10 feet of an intersection, which makes it a little bit easier to navigate those intersections rather than more difficult. Whereas if cars are actually in the intersection, you would typically where those bump outs are, you would get a ticket for parking there. But again, that's a comment. But my question is about what it's going to look like at Murray and Solway, since that's not done yet.
Yes, this is Barton again. Fortunately, Murray is quite a bit wider than Wightman and Nagley. And so we do have, yes, the bump outs will be similarly wide. I don't know the exact dimensions. They are not wider than 6 feet, so they wouldn't extend out further than the parking lane on either side. But they will not have the same effect on in quite the same way as Nagley and Solway or Nagley and Woodmont, because Murray is wider and does have sufficient width for 2 full lanes of traffic.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Barton. I have a couple of questions from the chat I want to catch up on, and then we can see if anyone else has more questions to ask verbally. The first one I see from the chat is Solway between Murray and Shady is flat, Solway between Murray and Shady is flat, but is it still necessary to have these bump outs? Without the bump outs, where would the water go? Is it just that the bump outs slow the water down?
So this is Barton again. The function of the bump outs is actually to intercept the stormwater from each block within the upstream of the bump out, and for smaller storm events, roughly up to about the an inch and a half of rainfall. So the majority of our storm events during the year are an inch and a half or less. Occasionally we have more intense storms, but for the majority of our storms, these bump outs will collect that water that's flowing along the gutter and divert it away from the street inlets that are kind of out in the intersection or further out in the intersection. Those inlets go to the combined sewer. So the function of these bump outs is to keep the stormwater out of that combined sewer. Once those bump outs become full or reach their full capacity, they can overflow to the combined sewer. But each of these series of bump outs are placed in such a way that water can, they're actually interconnected through a trench drain that goes across the street. It allows water to come in, come in through the curb cuts into the planters, across the street through the trench drain and onto the next planter. And then that water actually continues in the gutter down to the next series of planters. But when we have a really intense rainfall, that's when the stormwater bump outs overflow, and that overflow then is directed to the inlets to the combined sewer, so that we have sort of two drainage systems working at the same time for those really intense events.
Thank you, Barton, for that explanation. Another question, I have concerns about the quality of some of the newly planted street trees along Solway. They already have split trunks. Who provided and planted the trees, and are they warranted?
Yeah, our contractor hired a professional landscaper. This is the first I'm hearing of this. But they are warranted. I believe it's 2 years, so we'll definitely look into this.
Yes, thank you for letting us know, Phyllis. All right, I think that's the end of the chat. Let me just check to make sure I don't miss anything further up. Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions they want to ask in the chat or off mute to any of us? We can stick around for a few minutes if any questions come up. But we do appreciate you all taking the time. We're like, only took us an hour rather than an hour and a half so far. So that's always great. You'll get some time back in your night. But do let us know if you have any more questions that you want to answer before hopping off. Seems like we're good to the end for the evening then. Thank you all for joining us. And again, please feel free to reach out if you have more questions or comments.